A mother never came back from her shopping trip. After 14 years, her family learns the startling cause. The Hartman family living room's hardwood floor was covered in lengthy shadows as the evening sun streamed through the partially closed curtains. Dan Hartman, now 50, shifted his weight in his wheelchair and modified his position, wincing a little. The catastrophe had occurred 14 years prior. He had a fractured hip and was forced to use a wheelchair after a violent stroke that sent him sliding down the stairs. The physical restrictions were a continual reminder of how drastically his life had altered, even if time had passed. "Would you like a blanket, Dad?" Before he could respond, Ellie called from the kitchen and had already taken one out of the hall closet. She was the only one of his children still living at home at the age of 19, and she took up the duty of taking care of him every day with an adult level of maturity that was above her years. Dan answered, "I'm fine, sweetheart," with a tone of constant fatigue that had been ingrained in his character. When did Noah say he would arrive? 25-year-old Lucas, Dan's second oldest son, looked at his phone. "Around 6, should arrive any minute," he said. Although Lucas shared his father's broad shoulders and cleft chin, he possessed a more measured and pragmatic demeanor. After his mother vanished, he supported himself through college with scholarships and part-time work, and he now worked as an accountant at a downtown firm. "Would you just turn down the volume, Aldi?" As she was setting the dinner in the dining room, Leah called. She was now a responsible 23-year-old who ran a neighborhood bookshop. She went between the kitchen and dining area with efficiency, her shoulder-length dark hair pulled back in a handy ponytail. With the remote in hand, 15-year-old Aldi grudgingly declined the sports highlights he had been watching while splayed out on the couch. He defended himself by saying, "I'm just looking for a good movie for tonight," while he browsed streaming services. "That latest science fiction one, what about it? The one with the human-looking aliens?" Dan smiled slightly and added, "No aliens. Ellie dislikes them. You know that." Ellie came with a stack of plates from the kitchen. "Aliens are fine with me. I just dislike it when they burst out of people's chests during dessert." The warmth of the familiar banter filled the house, demonstrating how they had persevered as a family in spite of everything. On weekends, all 5 of the kids would get together for a movie, dinner, and talk. It was their custom, their means of preserving the bonds that had sustained them during the years of separation. Leah declared, "The table is ready," taking a moment to appreciate her creation. Every plate was precisely positioned. Glasses were filled with ice water. Napkins were folded nicely next to forks and knives, and everything was in its correct place, just as their mother had taught them. There were 5 place settings, with a 6th at the head of the table for Noah. As he headed to the dining room, "There's a wonderful smell," Ellie excitedly said, "and lasagna, and I also baked garlic bread." With his gangly teenage form tucking into his normal chair, Aldi gave up looking for a movie and joined them at the table. "Shall we begin? I'm going hungry." Dan shook his head and wheeled himself to his place at the table. "We always wait till everyone is present before we wait for Noah." As he eyed the steaming dish in the middle of the table, Aldi grumbled that the food was growing cold. "I'll give him a call," Lucas said, having already dialed his brother's phone. A second later, he scowled. No response, voicemail. As the minutes passed, they sat silently. The ice in their water glasses started to melt, and the lasagna stopped steaming. Dan's forehead was creased with stress as he kept checking his watch. Leah was going to propose that they begin without Noah when they heard a car pull into the driveway and then a car door bang. Noah's 30-year-old face flushed with worry and excitement as the front door flew open and he hurried in. His normally tidy appearance was unkempt, with his dark hair cascading across his forehead, his tie unfastened, and his top button undone. He looked around the dining room, observing his family waiting for him around the table. He responded breathlessly, "Sorry, I'm late." Yet there was a tension and urgency in his voice that instantly made everyone on edge. "No worries. We were just going to," Dan said, but Noah interrupted. He pulled out his chair but stayed upright and exclaimed, "I found something!" concerning Mom. The room's atmosphere changed abruptly. The temperature appeared to drop by a few degrees. Shoulders stiffened and faces tightened. Fumbling with his phone, Noah added, "Today I received a call from Detective Collins." Dan firmly replied, "Sit down, Noah. We've been waiting for you, and the food is getting cold. I need to show you something. You don't realize how significant this is, Dad." Noah stood, holding his phone tightly like a lifeline. "Please wait a minute." "Your father's right," Lucas said in a cool but firm voice. "Whatever it is can wait till after supper. Let's eat first." Desperate for an ally, Noah searched the table but was unsuccessful. Leah was examining her dish. Aldi was looking at him with a mix of uneasiness and annoyance, while Ellie was anxiously chewing her lip. After discussing this, Leah added softly, "We decided to stop bringing up Mom at family gatherings. However, Noah claimed that this is different, and the cops discovered—" "Enough!" Lucas's voice started up. "We are aware that she left us because she was unable to cope with it any longer. She found someone else and took off after her dad's accident. The medical bills, and having to raise 5 children alone." Noah retorted, "That's not true. Mom would never." "But she did, didn't she?" With a break of her composed exterior, Leah joined in. "What would you call it when Dad is in a wheelchair? We're drowning in debt from his medical costs, and then she vanishes without a trace." Lucas softened his voice a little and said, 14 years, Noah, 14 years without a word. Nothing, no letters, no calls. What more evidence is required?" Voices overlapping as years of hurt and bitterness boiled to the surface. The passionate exchange intensified. Ellie gazed helplessly between her quarreling siblings as Aldi squirmed in his chair. Enough! When Dan's voice echoed across the room, he was instantly hunched over in his wheelchair due to a wheezing cough. Immediately, the combat ceased. When her father's coughing stopped, Ellie leaped up to give him a back pat and offer him water. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad," before turning to her siblings. "Can't we just have one quiet dinner? Dad has been anticipating tonight for the entire week, and he misses us." Dan's labored breathing as he recovered from his coughing spell was the only sound to break the thick silence that had descended upon the table. At last, Noah sank into his chair and murmured, "Fine." His mouth was clenched in irritation, but he wanted everyone to know that this wasn't just another fruitless lead. The police had located Mom's car, which was submerged in a river. This revelation made everyone pay attention, even though they were determined to ignore him. "What?" Dan's voice could hardly be heard. Sensing his opening, Noah added, "Detective Collins called me this afternoon. I was late because I was on the phone with him to collect facts after they discovered her car in a river." Dan looked across to Ellie. "Please, take my phone off the side table." She swiftly got it back, seeing her father's face become white as he shook his fingers and flipped through his notifications. He looked up at Noah and confirmed that Detective Collins had missed 4 calls. "Has her body been discovered?" Noah gave a headshake. "I'm not sure. The detective mentioned that they're still analyzing the situation and that it would be beneficial if we could visit that area." As the gravity of this new situation set in, the family looked at each other, forgetting about the food. Ellie broke the startled silence by suggesting that we eat something first. She glanced worriedly at her father, her pragmatic side taking over. "It will just take a few minutes for Dad to take his medication with food." Lucas gave a nod of agreement. "She is correct. Let's eat quickly before leaving." Forks scraped against plates as they rushed through the meal, their minds racing with questions none of them dared to ask out loud. They ate in tight silence, the once appetizing lasagna now tasteless in their tongue. Lucas and Aldi started cleaning the table when they had eaten enough to warrant leaving, while Leah and Ellie assisted Dan in getting ready for the surprise visit. Leah got his phone and wallet, and Ellie got his medicine and a blanket. "Dad, are you certain you want to leave?" As she assisted him in adjusting his jumper, Ellie questioned quietly, "While the others investigate, we may remain here." Dan gave a hard shake of his head. "I must be present. The evening had grown darker outside, and there was a cold in the air that wasn't there when they had gotten together for dinner. The ancient family SUV was waiting in the driveway of their small house, modified to fit Dan's wheelchair. Situated on the outskirts of town, this one-story ranch-style home was encircled by old oak trees that had seen the family's happiness and grief for many years. Noah and Lucas folded the wheelchair and put it in the back, after carefully assisting their father out of it and onto the passenger seat. Noah took the wheel while Leah, Ellie, and Aldi climbed into the center row. He adjusted the mirrors and replied, "I'll drive. I am fully aware of our destination." Noah couldn't help but notice the house's exterior as he backed out of the driveway. The porch light is on, and the yard is bathed in a pleasant glow from the windows. On a calm evening, it appeared to be just another family home. Nobody who happened to walk by would have guessed the chaos that swirled inside, or the glaring emptiness that had molded their lives for 14 years. The vehicle drove through the well-known streets of their little town, past the grocery shop where their mother was said to have gone the day she vanished, and the high school where all 5 of the children had gone. Despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins, Noah held on to the steering wheel and tried to keep the speed limit. What did Detective Vans tell you specifically? The stillness that had descended upon the automobile was broken by Dan's question. Noah continued to focus on the road. Not much, simply that when looking into something else, they discovered their mother's automobile in a river. On the phone, he didn't provide any information. "Why now?" Leah whispered from the back seat. "After all this time?" Nobody knew how to respond to her. There was a buzzing message on Noah's phone. He looked at it for a moment and replied, "That's the detective. He's sending the precise address. Miller's Lake is the location." Lucas pointed out that it would be almost half an hour from here. Why would Mum's vehicle be traveling that far? The implied meaning lingered in the air. A person might go to Miller's Lake if they didn't want to be discovered, because it was isolated and distant. The rest of the drive was spent in uncomfortable quiet, with each member of the family absorbed in their own thoughts. The road narrower and the lighting grew fewer as they exited the town. As they pulled into an uneven access road that went through thick trees toward the lake, Noah put on the high beams. Noah had to slow down as he made his way over the rutted route as the SUV jostled and bounced over the uneven ground. The trees opened after a few minutes, revealing Miller's Lake's glistening surface with its dark waters reflecting the bright lights of police cars positioned around the shore. Noah turned to his father and parked as close to the site as he could. "Are you prepared?" Dan nodded, his expression grimly determined. Ellie put a comforting touch on his shoulder as Lucas and Leah assisted him getting out of the car and into his wheelchair. The scent of stagnant water, dirt, and something more, something disagreeable that spoke of things long submerged and freshly disturbed, assaulted them as soon as they opened the car doors. As his elder siblings pushed their father's wheelchair in the direction of the police perimeter, Aldi hung back a little and wrinkled his nose. The wheels of the wheelchair occasionally sank into soft spots of mud, making it challenging to push it across the uneven terrain. Lucas and Leah had to cooperate to assist Dan. Ellie remained by her father's side, holding his arm as they made their way toward the assembled policemen. Noah walked ahead of his family, looking for a familiar face among the police officers. He saw Detective Collins standing close to the water's edge, engaged in a lengthy discussion with a uniformed cop. With salt and pepper hair and the constantly exhausted face of someone who had witnessed too much in his job, the investigator was a stocky man in his 40s. Collins. "The detective," Noah yelled, coming down in short steps. The detective turned, his grizzled face sparking with recognition. "You made it, Noah." He crossed the muddy seashore and looked past Noah to the rest of the family. "You brought everyone, I see. We had to be here," Noah said plainly. "What did you discover?" Investigator Collins pointed to the lake where a tow truck was parked, its strong winch already in place. An automobile, or what was left of one, sat on the coast. dripping with lake water and covered in silt and aquatic vegetation. The faded blue automobile that had formerly belonged to Grace Hartman was unmistakable despite the years spent below. As the family joined them, Detective Collins stated, "We found it early this afternoon. To be honest, we weren't searching for it. As part of a continuing investigation into drug trafficking, we had a helicopter examine the area. From above, the pilot saw something reflected in the lake." Dan's face was unreadable as he gazed at the wet car. "Have you located—" He was unable to complete the question. Detective Collins understood the unasked question and replied, "No bodies. That's the odd thing. When we pulled up, the automobile was empty." "Is it empty?" Startled, Lucas repeated. "Are you certain?" The detective confirmed that it was completely empty. "However, we did discover some intriguing objects within." "What sort of things?" Noah inquired excitedly. Detective Collins retrieved a sealed evidence bag with a water-damaged image inside after reaching into his pocket. This was kept in a plastic bag in the glove compartment, which helped to preserve it. "It's your mother's picture." With shaky hands, Dan grabbed the bag while gazing at the blurry picture of Grace, grinning and carefree at a moment before she vanished. The investigator went on, his tone becoming more cautious. "And there was something else. We discovered a man's belongings, including a baseball cap, a pair of men's sunglasses, and a receipt bearing his name." "I knew it," Leah reluced abruptly in a resentful tone. "Indeed, she fled with someone." "That is unfair," Noah complained right away. "That is unknown to us. What else might it be?" Lucas posed a challenge. "Men's stuff in Mum's car at the bottom of a lake, with no sign of Mum. She staged her own disappearance." "As is very obvious," Detective Vance continued. "Our investigation indicates the car was intentionally sunk. No damage that would be expected from an accident is present. It sank after the windows were rolled down and filled with water. No signs of violence or foul play have been found." Leah crossed her arms over her chest and stated, "I know what I'm doing is illegal," leaving her young children behind. She pretended that something had happened to her because she couldn't just leave without any repercussions. "That's ridiculous," Noah retorted. "Our mother would never desert us. Another explanation must exist." Aldi finally spoke up after remaining silent. "Up until this point, we all needed her, so why would she abandon us when Dad most needed her? People break sometimes," Lucas murmured softly. "With 5 children to raise, Dad's medical costs, and no assistance, the strain becomes unbearable. She discovered a route out and used it. Desperate, Noah resorted to Detective Vance. That's not something you truly believe, are you? There must be more to the story after all these years." The detective let out a deep sigh. "Noah, I've been in this position for 27 years. I have seen it previously. People go to great lengths to hide their tracks, and they disappear because they want to. But why now look for the car?" Dan questioned, his eyes full of emotion, but his voice steady. 14 years later, Detective Vance clarified, "We weren't looking for it, like I said. In this location, we were conducting airborne surveillance for a cocaine operation. The automobile was noticed from above by the chopper. Sometimes, especially when the sun is shining just right, you may see things underwater from that perspective. Just a coincidence." He produced a second evidence bag that included a little water-damaged item. "The car was recognized as belonging to your mother because of this. This family photo and her driver's license were in the center console." Gazing at the water-damaged but recognizable family portrait of himself, Grace, and all 5 children, which had been taken only months prior to her disappearance and his injury, Dan accepted the second evidence bag. "What comes next?" Lucas inquired, letting his pragmatic side show. Detective Vance gave him a neck rub. "We'll thoroughly examine the vehicle and look for any more evidence, but let's face it, this is a 14-year-old case. If we don't discover evidence that blatantly suggests foul activity, we lack the resources to launch a thorough inquiry." "That's it, then," Noah insisted. "Are you simply going to presume that she fled and disregard it?" "That's not what I said," the detective said calmly. "However, the data seems to be heading in a specific direction. Men's belongings in the car, intentional sinking of the vehicle, no body, no evidence of struggle. It lends credence to the idea that she left on her own volition." He glanced around at the family and said, "If you'd like, I can give you copies of all the evidence we've collected. Pictures, inventory records, and our initial results." "What's the point?" With a hollow voice, Leah spoke. "Nothing will change as a result." Dan, who had been largely quiet, broke his silence. "I'm exhausted, Ellie, and I want to go home now." Ellie walked behind his wheelchair and murmured softly, "Of course, Dad." Dan told Detective Collins to do whatever he needed to do with the car. "This mystery has plagued us for 14 years. I doubt that we will be at peace if we discover the truth today." Noah stood his ground as the family started to move away. "Those copies, please," he said firmly. Detective Collins nodded and took a manila packet out of his car, in case they came up. "I had them ready. Copies of some of the items we discovered in the glove compartment are also included in a separate envelope. When we initially brought the automobile out, my team took pictures of everything." After giving Noah the envelope, he put a kind touch on his shoulder. "Over the years, I have worked on scores of missing people cases. The firstborn is frequently the one who finds it most difficult to let go. Son, I hope these give you some peace of mind." Noah gazed down at the envelope he was holding. "Thank you." He felt the emotional and physical weight of the evidence bearing down on him as he made his way back to where his family was waiting by their car. Noah couldn't believe that his mother had just left them. Even if that's what everyone appeared to think, there must have been more to the tale, and the envelope he now held close to his chest might hold the answers. With their former excitement now deflated into a somber stillness, the family crammed themselves back into the SUV. This time, Lucas quietly took the keys from Noah and climbed into the driver's seat. He just re-Lucased, "I'll drive," and turned on the engine as the others got comfortable. In order to study the contents of the envelope, Noah went into the back row and claimed the spot for himself. He switched on the lights on his phone and started going through the papers as the car backed out of Miller's Lake. Standard police reports, recovery operation descriptions, inventory listings of the goods found in the car, and pictures of the vehicle taken from different perspectives that demonstrated its damaged state after 14 years underwater were included in the opening pages. Noah carefully read every page, searching for anything that might contradict the story of desertion, but he found little evidence to refute his mother's devotion. On the trip to the lake, Lucas drove more aggressively than Noah had, accelerating quickly on straightaways and hitting fast corners. Noah found it hard to concentrate on the paperwork because of the jostling. "Would you please slow down?" Lucas either ignored him or didn't hear him as he shouted to the front. Noah reluctantly put the papers back in the envelope after a few more minutes of attempting to read through the bouncing and swaying. He had decided to wait until they got home, or at the very least, until he was by himself in his own apartment, where he could thoroughly examine everything without his siblings' critical eyes. With the exception of the engine's hum and Dan's sporadic sighs from the passenger seat, the drive back to their father's house was uncomfortable quiet. Aldi was the first to ease the tension when they pulled into the driveway, the porch light still shining warmly. "Is the movie we're viewing still on?" He looked around at his relatives and asked cautiously, "This isn't how we have to end the evening, is it?" After a little silence, Leah gave a slow nod in response to the inquiry. "That seems like an excellent idea. It would be unfortunate to waste the evening because dessert is still on the table." "Dad?" Ellie sought assurance from her father. Dan forced a tiny smile. "Yes, I believe the diversion would be beneficial to all of us." They walked inside and assisted Dan in getting back into his wheelchair, while Ellie went to the kitchen to get the apple pie she had baked earlier. Lucas and Leah made their way directly to the living room, where they turned on the TV and browsed through the available selections. After vacillating erratically between groups, Aldi joined his elder siblings at the television. Noah stayed near the door, still holding the envelope tightly. "I'm leaving," he declared. Everyone else looked at him. "What are you saying?" Dan inquired. "I'm heading home," Noah said. "I wish to thoroughly review these files. Something significant could be present." "Noah," Lucas cut in, his tone hinting at frustration. "Give it up. After 14 years, we finally have some answers. At least we now know, even though it's not what we wanted to hear." Noah claimed that we don't know anything. "An automobile in a lake and a number of presumptions are all we have." Ellie whispered, "Please stay for the movie. When everyone has had a chance to think, we can discuss all of this tomorrow." Noah glanced at his youngest sister, who had an open and beseeching expression, before turning to face his father, who was slouched in his wheelchair and appeared older and more worn out than he had been only hours before. He briefly contemplated giving in and watching a movie he refused to watch, acting as though nothing was wrong while his head was full with questions. Finally, he apologized. "I must do this," without waiting for more protests. He retreated through the door and made his way to his vehicle. He could see his family settling into their regular positions and congregating around the TV via the front window. Ellie was sitting on the armrest next to Dan, who was in his wheelchair, while the others were strewn across the rest of the furniture. For a while, Noah sat in his car with the keys in the ignition but the engine not yet running. "Mom, where are you?" He spoke softly into the empty car. "How did you fare? Have you truly abandoned us?" Angry at the tears that threatened to spill, he wiped at his eyes. He whispered that I was the oldest. It was me who had to take over after Dad's accident. Instead of immediately enrolling in college, I took a job. I did everything I could to keep us together, even helping with the kids. They all despise me now because I refuse to believe that you left us. Noah inhaled deeply to regain his composure before starting the engine and turning on the interior lights. Spreading the papers across the passenger seat, he opened the envelope once more. This time, he saw a smaller envelope with the plain label, "Miscellaneous," inside. He opened it out of curiosity and discovered photocopies of documents and personal belongings that had been found inside the vehicle. One of them was a lease agreement of some sort, somewhat readable but obscured by the water damage. Noah gazed at it, bewildered. The name on the lease wasn't Grace Hartman, but it was dated about 3 months after his mother vanished. Rather, it had an unknown name, Victoria Carter. But it was the signature at the bottom of the page that Noah noticed. He instantly recognized his mother's handwriting, even though it was old and indistinct in the photocopy, the same swooping E that showed up in all of her shopping lists, the same looping C she used to sign his school permission cards. He stared at the signature and said, "Victoria Carter." Mom made up a name. Noah scanned the document more intently, his heart pounding. On the lease, there was an address. Noah took out his phone and hurriedly entered the address into a mapping app. On the outskirts of the city, miles away from their home and away from any residential area, the satellite view revealed a property situated in what looked to be an industrial zone. It was what looked to be a warehouse or storage facility in an area where similar industrial structures predominate, rather than a home or apartment complex. He whispered, "This doesn't make sense. Why would Mum use a fictitious name to rent a warehouse?" The name Raymond Doss was the next thing he saw on the lease. Although the name sounded somewhat familiar, Noah was unable to identify it right away. When he entered it into a search engine, the results chilled him to the bone. There were several news stories from years ago. Raymond Doss, a local businessman, is being questioned in a money laundering probe. Doss was exonerated of fraud charges because there was insufficient evidence. Properties owned by Raymond Doss are connected to illicit lending activities. After reading a few of the pieces, Noah pieced together a picture of a man who lived on the edge of the law, engaged in predatory lending, and engaged in other dubious business activities that the police had never been able to fully investigate. He turned to face the home and saw his family watching the movie together through the window. He briefly thought about returning inside and showing them what he had seen, but he knew they wouldn't pay attention. No leasing agreement or suspicious landlord could change their opinions about what happened to their mother. Noah put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, deciding that he would do this alone. Determined to learn more about his mother's relationship to Raymond Doss and the reason for her renting a warehouse under a false name, he directed the car toward the address listed on the lease agreement rather than his own apartment. As Noah got closer to the industrial zone, the GPS led him through streets that eventually gave place to poorly maintained roadways. There were fewer streetlights and more run-down structures, including factories with broken windows, storage facilities encircled by chain-link fences with razor wire on top, and the rare all-night truck stop that threw bright fluorescent light pools over vacant parking lots. The GPS indicated that he had arrived at his location after 20 minutes of driving. Slowing the vehicle, Noah looked through the windshield at a dilapidated one-story building that was set back from the street. Above the entryway, a worn sign hung crookedly, and the high-quality furnishings was being renovated. Noah parked a short way from the building in the gravel lot. It looked like it was barely in operation. There was an old pickup vehicle parked by a side entry, and a faint glimmer came from within. He could see that the windows were obscured from the inside, limiting any view of the interior as his headlights illuminated the facade. He turned off the engine, but stayed in the car, thinking about what to do. He hadn't made this much of a plan or considered what he would do once he actually located the location. It was about 10 o'clock now, and he didn't think anyone would be at work this late, but it was obvious that someone was inside. While he contemplated whether to go to the building or come back during the day, an older man carrying a steaming cup in a plastic container appeared from a side door. The man saw Noah's automobile right away and started to approach it at a slow, deliberate speed. Despite his natural desire to leave, Noah reasoned that this might be his only opportunity to find out more about this location and its relationship to his mother. When the man got closer, he rolled down his window. Although he was older than Noah had initially assumed, possibly in his early 60s, the security guard, because that appeared to be his job, moved with the strength and assurance of someone considerably younger. He wore a light jacket over a uniform shirt without the company's emblem, despite the late hour and the chilly weather. His eyes were keen as they evaluated Noah, and his face was worn but attentive. "Evening," the man murmured, his voice surprisingly friendly. "You confused?" Noah halted, quickly evaluating his approach. "Unless they took a wrong turn. Not many folks find themselves out here this time of night." The risk of the truth felt too great. He couldn't simply declare that he was looking into the relationship between this location and his long-lost mother. He chose to tell a believable lie instead. "I believe you were correct. I may have missed a turn," Noah said in an attempt at casualness. "However, I came across this location while I was driving by. You see, I've been searching the neighborhood for warehouse space for my small business." The guard took a sip of his coffee and looked at Noah over the rim of the cup, thinking, "I know it's late, but I thought I'd check it out. This ain't for sale, if that's what you're wondering." "Who is the owner?" Noah asked, attempting to sound inquisitive. The guard said, Harvey Doss." The familiar last name made Noah's pulse skip a beat. "Harvey Doss." The guard arched an eyebrow and said, "I don't think I've heard of him." "Son of Raymond Doss. Are you unfamiliar with Raymond Doss?" Noah pretended to be uninformed by shaking his head. "Should I have?" The guard clarified that Raymond owned half of the industrial property in this area, died a couple of years ago. Harvey, his son, took over the company. "I understand," Noah responded, his thoughts racing. "Is there a way to contact Harvey?" The guard laughed and said, "Harvey is a private man. If not to purchase the property, perhaps to talk about renting a portion of it. Doesn't interact directly with people, particularly not those who arrive after hours without warning." Is there someone else I could talk to then? A manager or representative, perhaps, tomorrow? The guard seemed to consider this for a moment. Tell me what. Return during business hours tomorrow. Request Ronald. Here, he manages Harvey's affairs. Ronald, Noah said again, memorizing the name. He will undoubtedly be present tomorrow. I can inform him tonight that someone is interested, Noah continued, purposefully omitting his own number. I report to him, and I got his number. The guard took another sip of his coffee and nodded, saying, I'll just stop by tomorrow. Ronald prefers to do business in person. Just so you know, he doesn't like it when people bring partners or outsiders to these first meetings. Likes to size people up one-on-one first. I understand, Noah said. I'll come alone. He was going to pull his window back up when he had an epiphany. He would only have verified that the Doss family still held the land if he had gone immediately, without learning anything specific. He yelled out to the guard, who had already started to leave, taking a calculated chance. Also, he said, I doubt you've ever heard of a woman named Victoria Carter in this region. The impact was instantaneous and striking. The guard's entire countenance shifted, his face hardening into an expressionless mask and his shoulders becoming rigid. The friendly security guard disappeared, to be replaced by a considerably more threatening individual. You must go, he replied bluntly, losing all pretense of civility. And now, Noah pushed harder, aware that he had overplayed his hand, but unable to completely back off. I just need to know if... The guard walked with unexpected quickness, bringing the distance to the car down to 2 long strides, and leaned in, his face inches from Noah's, resting his old hands on the edge of his partially open window. You desire ghosts. His voice was low and threatening as he requested. Noah's spine tingled as he said, You're in the right place. She didn't want to be found. What are you saying? He struggled to maintain a steady tone as he asked. The guard straightened up and pressed his knuckles against the doorframe. If you want to talk about that too, come see Ronald tomorrow, but I'd advise against it, he said, knocking on the car frame again. Who didn't want to be found? After a brief moment of hesitation, Noah put the car in reverse and slowly backed away, watching as the guard stood in the same spot. Watching him with icy eyes until he turned the car around and drove off, his mind racing as he made his way back toward the town. For the first time in 14 years, Noah felt he was finally on the trail of something real, something that might explain what had happened to his mother. The dashboard clock read 11:35 p.m. as Noah drove back toward the town, his mind a flurry of questions and theories. The guard had obviously recognized Victoria Carter, his mother's fictitious name, and his reaction confirmed that Victoria, or Grace, had some connection to this place. But what did he mean by ghosts? And why would he say she didn't want to be found, if not to confirm that his mother had vanished voluntarily? Noah knew he should tell his family what he had found, but he doubted they would listen after their reaction at dinner and the lake. The implications seemed to confirm what his siblings thought, that their mother had made the decision to disappear. But something about the guard's reaction, the abrupt change from friendly to threatening, suggested there was more to the story than a woman simply walking away from her life. They had reconciled in their own ways with the fact that their mother had abandoned them. Lucas had grown into the responsible, pragmatic one. Leah had resolute against more disappointment. Ellie had focused her energies on taking care of their father, and Aldi, who had been only a year old when Grace vanished, had never really known her at all, with the exception of Noah, who had never come to terms with the abandonment story in the first place. None of them wanted to reopen old wounds, but there was another person who could be interested in what he had discovered. Noah pulled over to the side of the road, found Detective Collins's card in his wallet, and paused before calling, wondering how the detective would respond if he found out that Noah had gone himself to investigate. Collins here. The detective answered on the 4th ring, his voice heavy with sleep, but finally determined the information was too crucial to keep to himself. I apologize for the late call, detective. It was Noah Hartman. The detective rustled like though he was sitting up in bed. A contract or lease agreement of some sort was in the miscellaneous folder, and the address there indicated a warehouse rented under the name Victoria Carter. "I found something in the evidence copies you gave me," Noah began, choosing to ease into the complete truth. "Is everything all right, Noah?" But the signature, which is my mother's handwriting, attracted my eye as well, Detective Collins said, seeming more alert now. Noah, unable to contain his allegation, questioned, "Why didn't you mention it earlier?" The detective patiently responded, "And because it fits with what we already suspected. Voluntary disappearances frequently result in the creation of new identities." "But it's not a house or an apartment," Noah said. "It's a warehouse in an industrial zone, and the landlord is Raymond Doss. They rent apartments under false identities, create new lives." "Did you look him up?" The other end of the line paused. "Yes, I did. Raymond Doss was a familiar name in some quarters," Detective Collins explained. "I think this all connects because my mother would rent a property from someone like that. He was investigated multiple times but never successfully prosecuted for his businesses, which operated in grey areas of the law, predatory loans, and debt collection practices that skirted legal boundaries. That warehouse was probably a transition point, a site where individuals went to receive new identities before going on. And based on the evidence we've gathered, I think your mother needed to swiftly and fully vanish. Raymond Doss's operations included helping people do just that for a paying price." Noah responded incredulously. "You think she went there to change her identity?" "It makes sense with the timing," the investigator said, adding that she had gone there to start a new life. She would have time to make plans, perhaps with a new partner, given the lease is dated 3 months after her disappearance. Noah insisted on knowing what the new partner would be. Detective Collins reminded him about the sunglasses we found in the car, men's sunglasses with the name Ronald engraved on one arm, but there's no proof she was seeing anyone. Noah almost dropped the phone. "Ronald," he said again, his heart pounding. "You're certain the name was Ronald?" "Yes," the detective said. "Why? Does that name mean anything to you?" Noah's thoughts were racing. The warehouse guard had mentioned Ronald, claiming that he was in charge of Harvey Doss's affairs, and had asked Noah to meet with him tomorrow. Could this be the same Ronald whose sunglasses were discovered in Grace's car? Detective Collins asked Noah, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I discovered the lease agreement and drove to the location on it. Are you still there?" "I'm here," he finally said. "Noah, that was extremely reckless. If there is any connection between Raymond Doss's operations and your mother's disappearance—" I know, Noah interrupted, "but I did learn something." "You did what?" The detective's voice rose abruptly. "I mentioned my mother's name to a security guard there, and he responded by identifying her as detective and mentioning a man named Ronald who works there, possibly the same Ronald whose sunglasses were in Mom's car." There was a long pause before Detective Collins spoke again, and his voice was controlled and measured. "I want you to pay close attention, Noah. These individuals are deadly, and they won't think twice about defending themselves if they're implicated in your mother's abduction. But—" "No buts," the detective stopped forcefully. "This is now an active police investigation, and we'll handle it properly, with warrants and backup. I don't want you going anywhere near that warehouse again." "Understood. Your involvement might put you in grave danger and ruin everything." Noah tightened his hold on the phone. "What am I to do?" "Just sit and wait. I appreciate you giving this information, but now I need you to back off and let us do our job." Detective Collins confirmed that's exactly what you're meant to do. "The guard instructed me to return tomorrow to speak with Ronald," Noah added. The investigator forcefully stated, "Under no circumstances are you to go back there. This might be our only opportunity to learn what happened to my mother." Noah knew the detective was correct, but the idea of waiting, of maybe missing their one lead after 14 years of nothing, was too much to take. "We'll send in an undercover officer, set up surveillance. There are proper procedures for this kind of case. Nevertheless, he acknowledged the risk to himself and to any possible inquiry. "All right," he said. "I won't return there." Detective Collins responded, "Thank you," with a tone of relief in his voice. "I'll make some calls now, get things going. We'll keep you informed of any developments, I promise." Before the detective could end the call, Noah said, "You should know that my father and siblings are at risk too, if these people realize we're investigating." Detective Collins promised to set up patrol cars to make routine runs by both your apartment and your father's house. "Get some sleep, Noah, and don't go near that warehouse." The detective's cautions made sense, and the risk was genuine. So Noah hung up the phone and sat in his parked car for a few minutes, considering his options. Nevertheless, the rational part of his brain that advised caution was pushed back by 14 years of questions, wondering what had happened to his mother, and being the only one who thought she hadn't abandoned them voluntarily. Ultimately, he parked his car in his apartment lot, knowing that sleep would not be possible, but also realizing that he needed to carefully consider his next course of action. Whatever he chose, one thing was certain. After hours of tossing and turning, Noah finally fell into a fitful sleep around 4 a.m., only to be awakened by his phone ringing at 7:30 a.m., the caller ID displaying Detective Collins's number, and morning arrived with a clarity that had eluded him throughout his restless night. He'd never been closer to the truth about his mother's disappearance. When Noah replied, the detective added without introduction, "I'm on my way to pick you up. We're going to that warehouse, but we're doing it my way. Be ready in 15 minutes. As promised, 15 minutes later, Detective Collins pulled up outside Noah's apartment building in an unlucased police car, wearing jeans, a faded button-down shirt, a worn leather jacket that made him look more like a construction worker than a detective, and plain clothes instead of his typical suit. Noah climbed into the passenger seat and realized right away that the detective wasn't alone. As he pulled away from the curb, Detective Collins explained, "Based on what you told me about Raymond Doss and his son Harvey, we're treating this as a potentially dangerous situation." Another man, also in plain clothes, sat in the back seat. Collins introduced him simply as Officer Miller Tactical Support. "I've been up all night coordinating this. A tactical team is waiting a few blocks away, and I have plainclothes officers positioned at key points throughout the warehouse. Noah proposed that we take my car, since the guard spotted it last night, and it might appear less odd." After giving this some thought, Detective Collins nodded and said, "You're right. We'll switch vehicles at the next parking lot." 10 minutes later, they had moved to Noah's automobile, with Detective Collins sitting in the passenger seat and Noah driving. As they got closer to the industrial area where the warehouse was, Detective Collins told Officer Miller to stay in the unlucased police car that would now be part of the surveillance perimeter. "Remember, you're not to get out of the car unless I explicitly tell you to. I'm only allowing you to come along because you've already made contact and your presence will seem less suspicious. But this is a police operation, not a family investigation." Detective Collins muttered, his seasoned eyes sweeping the property. "Something's not right." Noah nodded, his mouth dry with nervousness and anticipation. As they turned onto the street leading to the warehouse, he could see the same pickup truck parked outside that had been there the previous evening, but something felt different. The place seemed quieter, more still. There was no traffic, only that truck. Noah parked in the gravel lot about where he had been the night before, and they sat for a while, looking at the warehouse. "Wait here," Detective Collins said, reaching for the concealed pistol under his jacket. "I'm going to take a quick look." The windows were still covered, but unlike the previous night, there were no lights visible inside. Noah watched as the detective approached the building cautiously, with the practiced efficiency of someone trained to assess dangerous situations, checking the pickup truck first, looking through the windows, then heading toward the side entrance, where Noah had seen the guard emerge the previous evening, and saying, "If I signal you to leave, drive away immediately and meet Officer Miller at the rendezvous point." Detective Collins tried the door and discovered it was unlocked, then vanished inside the building. 5 minutes went by, then 10, and Noah's nerves were getting worse every second, his fingers tapping frantically on the steering wheel. "It's empty," Detective Collins muttered as Noah neared, and he finally emerged at the entrance, motioning for Noah to follow him. Against his better judgment, but out of a need to know, Noah got out of the car and rushed across the gravel lot. "They must have departed quickly after your visit last night, because they were completely cleared out." Noah followed the detective into the warehouse, which was large and largely deserted, with rectangular clean spots on the dusty floor, empty brackets on the walls where shelving had been installed, and severed cables hanging from the ceiling, all of which were obvious signs that the equipment and furniture had just been removed. Detective Collins pointed to an area of the warehouse where partitions had constructed different rooms and said, "Look at these. Makeshift living quarters, workstations. This was more than just storage. They were definitely operating something here," Detective Collins called from across the room as he crouched next to an overturned desk, looking at something on the floor. Noah walked slowly through the room, trying to picture his mother here, trying to figure out what connection she might have had to this place, whether she had been held against her will. Had she come here willingly to get help to disappear, or was there some other explanation entirely? "Turn it over," Detective Collins said, passing the photograph to Noah. When Noah joined him, he discovered the detective holding a photograph that had apparently slipped under the desk during the hurried evacuation, showing a cargo ship docked at what looked to be an industrial port, with its name, Atlantic Horizon, prominently displayed on the hull. There was handwritten information on the back, the name of the ship, a departure schedule for the next week, and a partial list of names that included Victoria C. and Ronald M. E. Detective Collins pulled out his phone and said, "They're planning to transport people on this ship, and based on this list, your mother might be one of them." He radioed his team right away, asking for a search operation at the harbor and giving the name of the cargo ship, saying that this was now the top priority. "We must find the Atlantic Horizon and stop it from leaving. Notify the Coast Guard and Harbor Patrol." He turned to Noah and continued, "We must move. They might have accelerated their schedule if Ronald and his people had left here last night, and the ship might be getting ready to go earlier than planned." Detective Collins called again as they rushed back to the car, asking cops to check on Dan and the rest of the family. "We need to make sure your family is protected. These folks know someone is asking questions after your visit last night." Noah was terrified for his father and siblings. He confessed, I didn't think about that. I was so focused on finding Mom." Detective Collins told them to call them as they climbed back into Noah's car. Call each person separately and explain the situation, advise them to remain in their current location, and inform them that officers will be arriving to secure their positions. Noah followed instructions and called his father first, followed by each of his siblings, repeating the warning and instructions as they drove toward the harbor. "They're all warned," Noah said Detective Collins as they got closer to the harbor, "but I'm not sure they truly believe there's any danger." Dan was startled and angry. Lucas and Leah were skeptical, and Aldi was perplexed, but they all decided to follow the detective's advice. "If Ronald and the DOS operation are as dangerous as I suspect, they won't hesitate to use your family as leverage if they feel cornered," the detective said grimly. "Better safe than sorry." The harbor appeared, a vast industrial port with many piers jutting into the grey waters of the bay. Detective Collins flashed his badge to the guard at the main security gate, explaining that they were part of an ongoing police operation, and the guard waved them through, pointing them in the direction of the harbor master's office. Cargo ships of all sizes were docked along the wharves, loading or unloading their shipments, while smaller vessels navigated the channels between them. Detective Collins approached a uniformed officer who seemed to be in charge of the operation and inquired, "What's the status?" A number of officers were already there, working with harbor officials to identify the Atlantic Horizon. The officer reported, grimly, that the Atlantic Horizon left port last night. The Port Authority granted the early departure request almost 12 hours before the scheduled departure time because of cited weather concerns. Even though there are no major weather systems in the area, according to meteorological reports. They knew, Noah said, the realization hitting him with crushing force. Detective Collins put a steadying hand on Noah's shoulder and said, "We're not giving up." They knew we were on them the moment I inquired about my mother last night. We've notified the Coast Guard, and harbour patrol boats are now pursuing. That ship can't have gone very far in 12 hours. "What about here?" Noah said, pointing to the docks. The officer said, "We're one step ahead of you. We've detained several dock workers who were involved in the Atlantic Horizon's accelerated departure, and they're being questioned now. Couldn't some of Ronald's people still be around?" "Well done." Detective Collins nodded. "Let's go to the station. I want to watch those interrogations." Detective Collins was on his phone the entire way to the police station, organizing the growing investigation, receiving updates every few minutes about the Atlantic Horizon search or the security measures being implemented to protect the Hartman family. The drive to the station was tense. After one such contact, he said, Coast Guard planes located the ship about 100 miles offshore, moving south, and they are sending vessels to intercept it. When they got to the station, they discovered it bustling with activity. Officers moving purposefully between departments, phones ringing non-stop, and a sense of urgency permeating the building. Noah tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his mind racing with possibilities. Could his mother really be on that ship? After 14 years, was he finally close to finding her? As he approached them, Noah asked, "What are you all doing here? I thought you were staying at home." To his surprise, his entire family was there, sitting in a waiting area, with Dan in his wheelchair looking confused and exhausted, Ellie standing protectively behind him, Lucas and Leah sitting side by side, their faces a mix of concern and skepticism, and Aldi fidgeting nervously in his chair. Lucas stood facing his brother and explained that the police had brought us in as a precaution, saying it would be easier to protect us all in one place. "Protect us from what exactly?" Leah questioned, her arms crossed defensively. "What have you done, Noah?" Detective Collins came forward before Noah could answer, saying, "Your brother may have uncovered the truth about your mother's disappearance, and that truth could be dangerous for all of you," before quickly briefing the family on what they had found. "So you're saying Mum didn't leave us voluntarily?" Ellie said in a small, hopeful voice. "That she was taken, based on the evidence we've gathered. It appears your mother may have become involved with a criminal organization run by Raymond Doss and his son Harvey," Detective Collins explained, referring to the warehouse, the cargo ship photograph, the names on the list, and the possibility that Grace had been forced to work for Ronald and the Doss operation. "We think Mum was coerced into working for them, perhaps due to a debt or some other kind of pressure." "That doesn't make sense," Lucas said, adding that Mum had no debts. Dan, who had remained quiet until now, cleared his throat. "That's not entirely true," he murmured gently, adding that Dad had handled all the money back then. "The medical expenditures after my accident were overwhelming," Dan said, his voice straining with the effort of confession as all eyes turned to him in surprise. "Our insurance didn't cover all. I was in the hospital, then in rehab, and Grace was desperate. She tried to acquire bank loans, but we had already maxed up our credit." Noah, who was kneeling next to his father's wheelchair, said, "Dad, are you saying Mum might have borrowed money from someone like Raymond Doss?" Dan nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "I didn't know what exactly she was doing to keep us afloat. I didn't ask questions, since I was too preoccupied with my recuperation and the agony to pay attention to her once, just once, saying that she had managed to pay the bills." Detective Vans pulled up a chair and sat across from Dan. "Mr. Hartman, this is crucial. I should have asked questions. About a week before she vanished, your wife mentioned something strange. Everything she did for us. Did she ever mention names? Raymond Doss, Ronald? Anyone involved in the loans?" Dan shook his head. "The men we arrested at the harbour are being questioned now," Detective Vans stated, addressing the whole family. I thought she was just stressed, saying dramatic things because of the pressure we were under. I never imagined. His voice broke and Ellie put a comforting hand on his shoulder. Detective Vans hesitated, but Noah firmly continued, I want to talk to them. We're hoping they can provide more information about the Atlantic horizon and whether your mother might be on board. Noah pleaded, please, I'm the one who spoke to the guard at the warehouse. I might recognize someone or they might recognize me. That's not standard procedure, Noah. Detective Vans thought for a time, then nodded. Okay, but only as an observer. I speak. Noah followed him down a hallway to a room where they could observe the interrogations through a one-way mirror. Two cops were questioning a middle-aged man wearing dock workers' clothes who was chained to a table. That's not the guard I met, Noah muttered, examining the man. Detective Vans took notes on a pad, occasionally whispering observations about the man's body language or responses, and after it became evident they would not get anything useful from this suspect, he suggested they try the next one. They watched for several minutes as the dock worker obstinately refused to provide any information beyond his name and his job at the harbor. Noah tensed as soon as they saw an older man being questioned in the second interrogation room. That's him, he murmured frantically. That's the warehouse guard. Noah verified. You're sure? Detective Vans examined the man through the glass. He's the one who told me about Ronald, Noah said. Unlike the dock worker, the guard appeared nearly at ease despite his situation, responding to queries with a detached calm that verged on laughter. The investigator nodded thoughtfully. Let's listen in, Noah whispered. He's lying. He freely acknowledged working security for Harvey Doss when questioned about his job, but denied knowing anything about the Atlantic Horizon's cargo or destination. He was aware of my mother. He practically acknowledged her presence. Detective Vans observed the interview for a few more minutes before deciding. Noah watched as Detective Vans walked into the interrogation room, addressed himself to the other cops, and sat down opposite the guard. I'm going in. Stay here and watch. You know, we've been watching that warehouse for a while, Vans stated nonchalantly, but Noah knew this was a bluff. We've identified most of the people who were held there, including Grace Hartman. The detective's style was different, less combative and more conversational. Detective Vans added, we know she was forced to work for Doss, probably because of a loan she couldn't repay. What we don't know is whether she's still alive and whether she's on that ship. The guard's face remained unchanged, but a slight strain developed in his shoulders. That's strange, Detective Vans continued, leaning forward a little, because you seem to know exactly who she was when her son mentioned her name last night. I don't know what you're talking about, the guard stated calmly. A flicker of recognition crossed the guard's face, but it was quickly suppressed. The detective said, her son is here, by the way. The guard said nothing, but his gaze flicked to the mirror, and he instantly recognized you. And let me tell you, he's fairly determined to find his mother after 14 years of believing she abandoned him and his family. We're going to catch up with that ship, Detective Vans added, his tone hardening. And when we do, everyone on board is going to start talking to save themselves. The Coast Guard is already pursuing the ship. You're looking at serious time. Detective Vans pressed. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, probably human trafficking. But if you help us now, if you tell us where that ship is headed, and whether Grace Hartman is on board, I can put in a good word with the prosecutor. Ronald Dew Harvey Doss. They'll throw you under the bus in a heartbeat to reduce their own sentences. The guard's composure finally showed cracks, and he shifted in his seat, turning his eyes to the table. The guard remained silent for a long period before letting out a heavy sigh, which is the sound of a man performing a difficult calculation. I'm old, he finally muttered. I'm sick, and prison is just another place to die. Detective Vans advised that before leaving, the guard should help a family locate their mother. I can't tell you where the ship is going. I really don't know. That information is compartmentalized, but I can give you access to something that might help. What's that? There's an app, a secure messaging system we use. My login might still work. It has a GPS tracker for the ship, security camera feeds from on board, and that's how Ronald keeps an eye on everything. The guard thought about this for a moment, then leaned forward and spoke quietly. The guard nodded slowly, as if I had said, "I'm dying anyhow, so why not do something decent for once?" Detective Vans slid a notepad across the table and wrote down the login details and all the information we needed to access it. As the guard started writing, Noah felt a wave of hope, unlike anything he had felt in 14 years. For the first time, he had tangible proof that his mother hadn't abandoned them and might still be alive. As they hurried down the corridor, Detective Van said to Noah, "Let's get this to the tech team immediately." He emerged from the interrogation room with a grim satisfaction, holding the guard's login information in his hand. If this app works like he says, we might be able to locate the ship and even get visual confirmation of who's on board. They went to a room where several officers sat at computer terminals, working with focused intensity. After explaining the importance of the login information, Detective Vans handed it to a tech specialist, who read it and nodded confidently. "We need to access this app without alerting anyone monitoring the system," Detective Vans said. "Give me a few minutes, and I should be able to set up a mirrored session that won't set off any security alerts." Noah and Detective Vans went back to the waiting area where the rest of the Hartman family was still waiting, and as they got closer, Noah could see the strain on each face. The hope that was battling with disbelief, and the fear of disappointment after so many years of resignation. "Did you learn anything?" Lucas asked, standing as they went in. "Our tech team is working on it now." "Perhaps," Detective Vans said tentatively. "The guard gave us access to an app that might help us locate the ship and confirm who's on board. Dad just told us about the hospital costs and how Mom was trying to find money to pay them." And you really think Mom might be alive?" Aldi questioned, his young face a mix of bewilderment and desperate hope. "That she didn't leave us on purpose," Noah answered gently. "These organizations work by isolating individuals," Detective Vans continued. "It makes sense now. She might have borrowed from DOS, couldn't repay, and they forced her to work for them." "But for 14 years, Leah protested, her normal skepticism shaken by uncertainty, without any touch at all. "If Grace had thought that getting in touch with you would have put you in danger, she might have stayed away to keep you safe. They split families apart and use compulsion and threats to keep control." Dan reached out to take Noah's hand, his eyes watering. Noah squeezed his father's hand and reassured him. "None of us knew, Dad. I should have known," he mumbled. "All these years I thought she'd abandoned us because I was broken, because I couldn't take care of our family anymore. But we're going to find her now. We're going to bring her home." Detective Vans's phone rang, cutting through the emotional moment, and he heard it swiftly before responding. "We'll be right there." He turned to the family and said, "The tech team has accessed the app, and they want us all in the computer lab immediately." They all went down the hallway together, with Lucas pushing Dan's wheelchair and Ellie and Leah walking behind their father in a protective and encouraging manner. The computer lab was a large room full of monitors, servers, and technical equipment. The specialist who had been working on the app called them over to a central workstation where a large screen displayed what looked like a map, with a blinking dot moving slowly across an expanse of blue. Aldi remained close to Noah, occasionally looking up at his oldest brother with newfound respect. The specialist pointed to the dot and stated, "That's the Atlantic horizon. We've already relayed these coordinates to the Coast Guard. The GPS tracker indicates that it's about 120 miles offshore and heading south-southeast." Detective Vans asked, "Can you access the security cameras?" The specialist nodded and typed quickly. "The app has restricted access to some security feeds, mostly in work areas rather than private spaces. The big screens divided into several smaller screens, each depicting a different part of the ship. Most showed cargo holds, hallways, or mechanical areas, but some showed what looked like makeshift workrooms, with mostly females seated at tables or computer terminals. I'm currently riding through them. Can you widen that one? Noah abruptly exclaimed, pointing to one of the feeds. The specialist enlarged the selected video to cover the screen, revealing a room filled with ladies working at computers, their faces partially turned away from the camera. Noah asked, his heart pounding, "Can you zoom in on that woman in the back?" The Hartman family gasped as the image zoomed and was enhanced. She was 14 years older than they remembered, her face thinner, her hair streaked with grey, but there was no mistaking the woman behind the computer. Dan extended a shaky palm toward the screen, as though attempting to touch his wife across the miles separating them. "Grace," he mumbled brokenly. "Mom," Ellie moaned, tears running down her cheeks. "We have visible confirmation of at least one kidnapping victim on board. Repeat, visual proof of Grace Hartman, who has been missing for 14 years. Detective Vans instantly grabbed his phone and relayed the confirmation to the Coast Guard forces pursuing the ship. "There are other possible victims on board, so proceed with extreme caution." He turned to the Hartman family and said the Coast Guard should stop the ship. "We'll have to keep radio silence about this so as not to notify any ship members who might be listening in on conversations, but they'll secure the ship and safely evacuate everyone on board. So what do we do now?" Lucas questioned. Detective Vans simply replied, "We wait, and we prepare for your mother's return." Dan sat silently in his wheelchair, tears occasionally streaming down his cheeks as he gazed at the picture of his wife, his earlier skepticism completely dissolving in the face of indisputable proof that their mother was alive. Aldi alternated between sitting next to his father and joining Noah, who stood resolutely by the main monitor, refusing to look away for more than a few seconds at a time. Ellie and Leah huddled together, sometimes whispering, sometimes just holding hands in silent support. Lucas paced the room, his practical nature seeking outlet in movement. When they were standing a little apart, Noah re-Lucased softly to Detective Vans. "I knew it, all these years. I knew she would never have left us voluntarily. You never gave up on her," the detective noted. "She was the one who never gave up on us," Noah reminded him, "and she survived whatever happened to her. No matter what they did to her, that kind of faith is uncommon. She lived for 14 years. In the silence of that moment, surrounded by proof of their mother's survival, Noah realized something profound about the nature of family ties. Faith was more than just believing without evidence. It was clinging to the truth when everything around him pointed to the contrary. As they stood on the brink of reunion, Noah realized that courage was not about facing external dangers, but about facing the fear of hope itself, the terrifying vulnerability of believing that broken things could be made whole again. His family had been broken for 14 years by abandonment, with each member building their own armor to protect themselves from the pain. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead on that cargo ship together, not as pieces of a broken family, but as what they had always been beneath the scars and silence, a constellation of lives bound by an unbreakable thread of love that neither time nor distance could sever. Their mother had suffered captivity to protect them, and now they would brave the unknown to bring her home.